we have been sold a bill of lies that says that vulnerability is weakness.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
Yes. It's so true. We're supposed to be stoic, and if we're like crying or sad, then we must be weak. Those are all things like we are wired for that. We are wired for intimate connections with each other. And the only way we can do that is to show up in our vulnerable, honest self.
Well, good morning, Mary.
Good morning. I'm just going to say we came out in freezing rain.
We did.
To get here because we are so committed.
Committed and ridiculous. At the same time.
But
so how's the hair looking today? Because I had to shield the hair.
It looks gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yes.
A little dry shampoo on the third day.
Yes,
good.
and it's perfect. And you shielded it well.
You know what my husband does not understand?
What's that?
No, he's bald. Okay, so,
Gracie doesn't understand.
There's that.
Yeah.
But like I'll say to him, okay, I'm on day 2 of dry shampoo. There is no third day. And he goes, you can't do one more day? I'm like, no, you can't do one more day on dry shampoo. It's a 2-day limit.
Is it? For me, I can go longer.
Oh, well, good for you.
Well, interesting facts of dry shampoo and all that. But everyone's hair is different. We're all unique. We're all trying to be our you-iest you.
Yeah.
Me-iest me, including dry shampoo.
So you can see that we've already digressed, but that's
because, it's the topic.
So you all know that we are diving into Dr. Mary's book, Rebecoming. And actually, this is going towards the finish line right now.
I know. You guys have hung in with us throughout a lot.
Does it feel like it's been like a 5K, a 10K, a marathon? Because for us,
yes,
it is the marathon.
Yes.
And, that's a good kind of analogy. When you're training, I know many of you have probably done that. You may have run a 1K, 5K, whatever. But you've done the training and it's hard. And you have to pay attention to your nutrition and stretching and rest days and all those things and setbacks.
Oh, yes.
And that is similar to this journey of rebecoming.
Yeah.
Because there will be joy and pain. There will be times that you need to rest and not move forward. You need to sit in the pain.
Yes.
And with it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like that.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And I would add, too, that it's kind of a marathon for life. Like, hopefully, as you become better at this and practice it, you'll actually find joy in the training, in the work, and even in the pain. I mean, that sounds kind of weird to say it that way. But there's a sense of hope that there is growth that comes out of the other side of it. So just a reminder again, as we enter into the transformation section of the book, that this is a lifelong journey and it's something that is going to take time. You need to have the self-compassion to continue through it and persistence and resilience and all that great stuff. And it's not a tickety box. Now that you've coming close to finishing the book, you can put it aside and let it gather dust. That is not the idea.
And I will say, I've said this before, but there are about 5 books on my bookshelf that I return to over and over again. And we've mentioned many of them here on the podcast. The Boundaries book is one of them, and some of the other books like Insight. But this is one of those books that will be on the shelf and it will come out frequently as I refer to it. Because when we talk about the rebecoming, and I've called it this coming home to yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
Because that idea of the birthright, that really, I'm going to be chewing on that one for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I will be returning to the chapters, and I should be, because it is not a one and done. Like I've done the work, I've answered the questions, closed my journal, pack it away.
Right.
Because shame and the shadow self and vulnerability and all those things are still going to be cropping up in my life.
Absolutely. And hopefully you're becoming more and more aware of it.
Yes.
Real time and able to make the shifts and adjustments along the way. But if you don't, it's okay. Because it's that, okay, I went down the old road again. What can I learn from that? How can I own it, take responsibility for it? And again, it's so freeing because when you are taking personal responsibility, you actually can do something about the quality of your life.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point when, sometimes we kind of slip.
Yeah.
But we catch ourselves and we say, like for me, it's like, what was behind that? Because it doesn't just happen. There's always something that's led to it.
Yeah.
And was I tired? Was I frustrated? Was I, like whatever it was, what was behind that reaction or that interpretation that I made?
Yeah.
That is not accurate.
Yeah.
And so, this coming home idea is, I would like to say that we're kind of always coming home to ourselves.
It's a constant thing.
Because it's taken me this many years to get to this person.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a long time to get back to that birthright and essential self.
Yeah. And to love her.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, to
Okay,
love
well,
her. That's a whole other.
We'll bypass that one for now.
No, you're not allowed. So this chapter is called The Strength of Vulnerability. Why am I doing this to myself, and why do I do it to others?
I think you're doing it just for me. I think you've written this.
Maybe. That's a possibility.
Yes.
What was interesting is this past weekend, we just did another set of the chapters with our small group. And afterwards, I was reflecting with Peter, my husband, about how it was not a comfortable experience on a number of the points of it.
No.
But so I had said something, I had a response that I felt hurt by, and I was able to real time let myself feel the pain, let myself feel the hurt, acknowledge it, not dismiss it. And then at the same time, kind of go, that's okay. That was not intentionally said to hurt me. I can let it go.
Yeah.
Do I need to talk to the other person? No, I don't think so, because I know they love me and they didn't do it on purpose.
Right.
And then I was able to process all that like pretty quickly. And so for me, vulnerability isn't just being honest. I think it's also letting myself feel those vulnerable emotions. Like that is big for me.
They're not comfortable.
They're not comfortable. I'd rather deny it. I'm optimistic in nature, so I can kind of go, it's no big deal. And I have always suppressed my emotions in the past. So letting myself acknowledge that I'm hurt and actually even feel it, the ache inside. And then I've also learned to speak up more often. But again, it's with judgment and with wisdom, hopefully, on whether or not it needs to be said or not said. Because if it's on a pattern that needs to be addressed, yes. Yeah. Or if it's a one-off where they're having a careless comment that was made, like, I'm not going to call them on it necessarily. No. So,
and one of the things that I shared with the group, as I, journey towards being more vulnerable with myself and with others, is that one of the things that I've come to realize is I love that Brene Brown in this chapter addresses vulnerabilities. Yeah. Like that's her life work, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I found that being vulnerable, for me, has to be without expectations of the other.
That's so
because if I'm vulnerable and then I have an expectation of that person's response back to me and it's not met, then what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go, well,
that didn't work.
Time out. That didn't work. So I'm going to go back inside.
Right.
And I'll just stay in my little world and not be vulnerable. I won't risk again.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful at all. That hasn't worked for me. So let's get honest with myself. So I think for me, with that level of vulnerability, I have to be able to go, I'm going to do this without expectations about how the other person is going to respond, because that's on them.
Right.
It's not on me.
Right. And that choice to be vulnerable is more for your own soul.
It is.
And your own growth. And you're risking.
Yep.
And the thing with risk, as we've recognized, is the more we risk, the more it becomes easier. And I really, really appreciate your perspective of saying, I can't control the other person's response. I mean, a lot of times when we're vulnerable with the expectation, or like, you're going to meet a need of mine.
That's
because
right.
I'm being vulnerable. So I'm throwing my vulnerability at you, hoping you catch it and somehow respond back to me. And so it's actually a bit of a shadow selfie type of
Yes.
maneuver.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminds me so much. Do you remember in the early days of Facebook
Yes.
when people would like vague post?
Oh, yes.
Like,
Having a bad day.
I'm so defeated today.
Yeah.
I just wish I could like deal with this. And then they were waiting for people to soothe them, right?
That's right.
Like, so sometimes when we're vulnerable, if we're doing it with the shadow self, it's almost like we're doing that. We're vague baiting to get attention.
Vague baiting. Whoa. That's a new term. Mark that one. So that's where I have to be aware that, again, the choice to be vulnerable is for my growth.
Yes.
And also it is for the hope. It is for hope that my relationships will grow. And I've certainly learned to become more vulnerable with my friends and with Peter, even with my kids. And they've been so responsive, not always in the way that I expect. And sometimes it's a little bit of but it's been so good because our relationships have deepened as a result. So that is the hope. I can still hope that relationships will get stronger. And if you don't try, it won't. It's kind of the thing. You won't become more vulnerable. The relationships won't strengthen. It won't become healthier. So you might as well try. And if they don't respond well, you at least get the fruit of the growth that comes with that.
And I think you can give yourself a nice big pat on the back and say,
think so too.
Look at me.
I think so
I
too.
risked.
Yeah.
And I was brave and I had courage and I did that. And I don't have to own the other person's stuff.
Right.
Because we have been sold a bill of lies that says that vulnerability is weakness.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
Yes. It's so true. We're supposed to be stoic, and if we're like crying or sad, then we must be weak and needy. Oh, gosh. And I hate to be perceived as needy. So I'd rather just be strong, in quotes.
That's right.
But I think true strength really is being able to be vulnerable, to be honest about our needs, to reach out for help. Those are all things like we are wired for that. We are wired for intimate connections with each other. And the only way we can do that is to show up in our vulnerable, honest self. Now, vulnerability doesn't mean that I let it all hang out.
Oh, no.
Because A, the person may not be safe or able to handle it, but B, it could be inappropriate sharing.
That's right. And we all know someone who's done that.
Exactly. So this is wise vulnerability. And if it's with trusted people, obviously I can do that. But even if it's an unknown person, I can sort of like test out the waters with some level of vulnerability.
That's right.
And if they're responsive to it, then it's like, this is a relationship that I want to pursue.
Yes.
Because I think we can get to a level of depth and connection that would be really
That's right.
life-giving. Like life-giving. Yeah.
And I think that, naturally when you look back at babies, how they go about trying to get their needs met, right?
Yes.
Like they act like they cry, they need to be soothed. And mom and dad are trying to go, okay, are they hungry? Are they tired? Is something hurting? Like what is going on? Are they sick? They're doing all that. When we are being vulnerable as adults, we can't expect the other person to interpret what is going on within us. Are we hurt?
Right.
Are we feeling whatever? Yeah. And I think when we're vulnerable, we can say, this is the way I'm feeling.
Right.
And, maybe, like, especially with my husband, I have to say, I actually have to be very clear with them because I know he can't read my mind.
No, I wish they could.
I can't expect him to.
I wish they would. But
I don't want to read his mind.
That's true. Well, a lot of times they can think nothing, apparently.
Yeah.
Last night when I was processing with Peter, it was like, you gotta remember I'm a simple guy. So because I was asking him, so after I said that thing on that other night, what were your thoughts? He goes, you said that? Oh, yeah. Well, it's kind of looking a little cornered and sort of like, I'm a simple guy. It was fine. I was able to let it go. I go, okay, good. Because I was thinking he was upset.
Of course.
So the thing with vulnerability, too, is even the word vulnerability, it's not about being emotionally honest and harming others as a result. Like it has to come from a place of tender soft emotions.
Yes.
It's the ones that are a little harder to share, like shame and insecurity and fear and all that. But recognize that when I feel shame, I can kind of hit out and I can start to blame others.
Oh, yes.
And I can project it onto others. So then in my pretend vulnerability, I'm going like, well, you made me feel so ashamed when you did this and this and this and that. And I think I'm being vulnerable. Actually, I'm blaming the other person.
Yes.
So vulnerability is a skill, and it does take practice, and it does take time.
Well, I love what she says.
Yes.
Like when she's talking about, actually, maybe, it could be your words here.
Probably.
But true courage is the choice to live with our heart wide open.
Yeah.
In fact, the original root of the word courage is cor, the Latin word for heart. Mm-hmm. And in one of the original usages, it meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart.
Yeah.
That is something.
Yeah.
And, Brene Brown goes on to remind us that vulnerability is not weakness. And the uncertainty, risk, and emotion we face every day are not optional. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't get a pass on, I don't get to wake up today and go, I'm not going to feel, emote, or, show any vulnerability. I'm not going to
be human.
Today. Exactly. Our only choice is a question of engagement.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key, is those that we choose to engage with and the things that we choose to engage about. Mm-hmm. That matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like what you said also, again, going back to what you said about expectations, having no expectations of the other person, is that at the same time, if the other person responds poorly to you, it doesn't mean that you should stop being vulnerable, but perhaps you can't be as vulnerable with that person because it's a matter of personal emotional safety. Mm-hmm. And emotional safety, by the way, doesn't mean that you can, sometimes people interpret emotional safety as in it's all focused on that person's sharings, the person who shared their needs. And that we're not allowed to have any reactions to it. And we're only there to hold their emotional things. And it's still a personal responsibility. Like, I can be vulnerable, but I'm going to have to take responsibility for my emotions. I'm not putting it on other people as well.
And I think that's always the underlying, it girds the vulnerability is wisdom.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Because how many of us have shared with someone who wasn't trustworthy or safe with us, and it's backfired on us or really, really hurt us. Mm-hmm. And so there's always got to be this undergirding of wisdom that comes with vulnerability for your own safety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's so important. And just great self-awareness too, because we can overfunction in that when I'm vulnerable and the other person doesn't respond well, then it's my fault because I didn't share it properly.
Right.
Or I didn't read it properly. And it just gets so complicated.
You also have to pick your timing.
You have to pick your, that is
right?
true. That is true.
I mean, you really have to pick your timing. You have to kind of wait for the right moment.
Yeah.
It's not in line at the grocery store. and often it's not. Like last night when we were driving home from having our time together, I knew my husband just needed to not think about anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't the right opportunity to have a conversation.
Right.
Because he was conversed out.
Yeah. And his emotions had already been
through the ringer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So for that was not the right timing. Now it could be later in the week where we're sitting at dinner and I go, hey, I've been thinking about the weekend and here's some thoughts I want to share. And I just wonder if this resonates with you and frame it that way. So it's not necessarily even asking his opinion, but sharing mine and then inviting some feedback.
That's right.
So I think in your relationships, you need to kind of be very wise and understand how the other person, and this is not expectation, but how they're wired and how they can approach things so that you can also make it safe for them.
I think that's so important because you are in a relationship, if it's especially with your husband. So safety for him is also really important.
Yeah.
And I think wisdom to know where people are at. So if I am going to go to a less mature friend and share something super deep with them and they kind of blink at me with deer caught in headlight that's happened to me before. It's not for me to go, oh my gosh, they're so unloving, they're so uncaring, but it's to recognize, okay, I've gone a little too vulnerable for where this person is at.
That's right.
I still love them. I still want to be friends with them, but I'm going to pull back a little bit. And so it takes wisdom to know that.
Yeah.
Especially with some of the tougher, vulnerable things. It's like sometimes if I talk about things in my past that have been really hard, and it's hard for me to speak it, it's hard for them to hear it, and they don't necessarily know how to respond. Letting go of those expectations and being wise about their ability to handle that is just so key to that journey of growth of vulnerability.
And, that takes me back to thinking about, in the early chapters of the book, when you talk about your experience as an Asian woman. If you're telling me that, and I'm not Asian, and I have not shared some of those life experiences, for me, when you're being vulnerable in that, it's time for me to sit back and listen and understand that although it's not part of my experience growing up, it is a valid experience for you. And then I can start to ask you more questions about it. Like I can say, wow, that wasn't my experience growing up, but I really want to hear more about that. Because I think too often when someone's being vulnerable, we want to commiserate with them and
oh, I totally get what you mean.
That's right.
And it's not true.
It's not true. Rather than be curious and admit that it hasn't been our experience.
Right.
And I think oftentimes that's where people get into trouble is they're too quick to agree with the experience that the other person's had, and it hasn't been their experience at all.
No. And even if I'm talking to another person who's Asian, it doesn't necessarily mean our experiences are going to be the same. So I think that care of, it goes back to letting go of expectations. I should not sit down with someone who's Asian and then automatically expect that they're going to resonate with what I'm sharing.
That's right.
So I'm going to be vulnerable because of my journey of growth and my desire to build a connection with this person. But then ultimately I have no control over them. So I think that is a really good reminder to do that. But I not having control of the other person, I was thinking about this after you said that yesterday, is that it's not that I'm gonna say, well, I don't care what you think, because I do care. At least I do. I can't help it. But that I'm gonna recognize that, oh, that was a little bit of an ouch, that did hurt that you responded that way, but it's okay. I can get that it wasn't something that the person was comfortable with or able to meet my needs in some way, and that's okay. And the growth is still there.
And sometimes I find that in a situation where someone's responded quite almost inappropriately, right, when we've been vulnerable, what's going on in them?
True.
Because often it's triggered something in them that has stirred up to the surface something that they're being defensive about, or that it's tweaked something that they just don't know how to respond to. They feel extremely uncomfortable and they just want to run away.
Yeah, shut it down.
And so often, you'll find someone trying to change the subject. And it's because it's not that they don't care, it's that they have no idea how to respond in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important point too, is like for us as people who want to invite vulnerability in our lives, I think it behooves us, is that old-fashioned?
Oh, I love that word.
To actually, after a while, we can't keep saying, I don't know how to handle this situation.
You get a buy for a little bit. You get a
buy for a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you genuinely want to do this journey of growth, personal growth, it's not just about you, because ultimately it's in relationship with others that you grow the most and you can have the opportunity to be the you-est you. So learning basic skills of empathy.
Yes.
Brene Brown has this fabulous video.
Yeah.
She compares sympathy versus empathy. Google it. I'm sure you can find it. And she does a really great job of explaining what empathy looks like.
Yes.
And it's not that hard, although it may feel difficult because you're not used to it. But just being able to have this open expression on your face, the nodding, the leaning forward with your body language, and even just to be able to say, I don't even know what to say in this situation.
That's right.
Like, I want to be here for you. Like,
That's
even
right.
to say simple things like that.
Yes.
Practice that, because trying to give advice is terrible. When people are sharing vulnerability, even if ultimately they do need the advice, it's not necessarily the time to give the advice.
No, it's not.
And it needs to be something that people invite you to. But also being silent, oh gosh, that's hard. And I don't mean silent as in you can be silent, but with your body language show empathy. But this stone-faced silence where you're kind of like, I don't know what to say. So
that's brutal.
I'm not going to say anything. That's
brutal.
just like, I don't want to get in trouble. That's difficult. So I think just learning some basic skills of how to respond to other people's vulnerability is it behooves us to do that.
Yes, I think it's like, for me, it's the funeral principle, right?
Oh, yes.
So for me, the funeral principle is this. Like, I actually had someone say to me years ago when a good friend of ours passed away, that they could not go to the visitation because they wouldn't know what to say.
Oh, gosh.
And I said, what?
Yeah.
Like, I said, you showing up is massive for that family.
It totally is.
And I said, nobody knows what to say. I said, so this is what you say. You say, I am so very sorry for your loss. I don't have the words to express that. Done.
Yeah.
Because no words are going to make up for anything.
No.
So I think when someone's being vulnerable with us, we can say, wow, thank you for sharing that.
Exactly.
I really don't even know what to say because I don't have the words right now to like enter that with you, but I want to sit with you in it. Done.
Yeah. Beautiful. Like I'm about ready to like cry just listening to you say that. That's what I long for.
That's right.
Yeah. No,
and I think
that's beautiful.
Like we think we have to have that scripted and these words, and you don't know what to say, and it's just okay to say that.
And it's okay to say that. Exactly. I did want to just sort of wrap up by reminding in the chapter I talk about counterfeit vulnerability. I just want to throw that in there because I know that in my journey of growth, sometimes I go down that road. And I have shared in a very curated way something vulnerable.
Yes.
And I'm really being pretty safe about it. But also it's become pretty hip. That's an old-fashioned word, even saying hip.
Yeah.
This just goes to show my age. But it's become kind of the thing where people will have vulnerable posts. They'll even put in asterisk vulnerable post. And I believe some of it is genuine, but I believe some of it is to get as many likes as possible.
It's the vague baiting stuff.
Yes.
It's a different way. I'll be vulnerable in order to get the response I want to boost my platform or the perception of me. And that's
right. So I think, being vulnerable is hard. I'm telling you that right from. It's probably one of the most difficult things to do, and it's going to take a lot of practice. But that's one of the things I just wanted to put out there to make sure that that's something that we're tracking with. And so, like, just at the end of the chapter, you'll see a bunch of questions. Do my friends know about my current struggles and worries? Do I talk openly about my negative emotions, such as fear, disappointment, jealousy? I mean, there's a whole list of them there. Have I told them about the things I'm most ashamed of? These are questions that are really good to reflect on.
Yeah, they are. They're fabulous questions.
Because then it helps us go, have I actually been vulnerable?
Yeah.
And where do I need to grow in this area? So anyway.
So dig deep into those questions because that's where the gold is. When you can sit with the chapter and listen to our own experiences with vulnerability and how hard it is for us, but then also to do your homework in this area because, again, it is a transformative journey, and this is part of the transformation is learning how to do this. And it will be messy.
Yes.
It's going to be messy. It's still messy for each of us.
Yeah.
But it is so worth it because we are wired to connect with people, and vulnerability brings about connection when it's healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in. And we're cheering you on as you do the work of growing in your ability to be vulnerable and also to be a safe person for others to be vulnerable with. So take care. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Fully Lived Life podcast. We hope you found it encouraging and helpful. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family and posting on your social media. Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode.